Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the magnificent halls of an ancient royal palace, where one of the hardest jobs in history wasn't fighting enemies, it was simply standing perfectly still. Imagine being chosen to guard the most powerful ruler in the kingdom. Every eye is watching you. Every movement is noticed. Your back aches, your legs burn, sweat runs beneath heavy armor, and yet, you are forbidden to move. No scratching your nose, no shifting your feet, no stretching tired muscles, no showing even the slightest sign of discomfort. So how did ancient royal guards remain motionless for hours at a time? What happened if they failed? How were they trained to master incredible discipline? And was protecting a king really as honorable as history makes it seem? Or was it one of the most exhausting jobs anyone could have? Tonight, we'll quietly explore the hidden world of ancient palace guards, their demanding daily routines, exhausting training, long hours of silent duty, strict rules, and the remarkable mental discipline required to protect kings and emperors throughout history. Before we begin, if you enjoy relaxing history that helps you unwind after a long day, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which civilization you'd like us to visit next. Now, settle beneath your blankets, relax your shoulders, and quietly walk with me through the echoing halls of an ancient palace, where a royal guard has already been standing for hours. The first thing you notice is not the king, it is the silence. A vast courtyard stretches before you, paved with enormous stone slabs polished smooth by countless footsteps over generations. The evening sun hangs low above distant hills, covering marble columns with gentle shades of amber and gold. Somewhere beyond the palace gardens, birds sing softly before settling into the trees. Water trickles through carved fountains, its steady rhythm blending with the whisper of a cool breeze. Nothing here seems hurried, even time itself feels slower. As you approach the towering bronze gates, carved with lions, eagles, and sacred symbols, two motionless figures stand on either side of the entrance. They seem almost unreal, like statues carved from dark stone rather than living men. Their spears remain perfectly upright, their eyes never wander, not toward visitors, not toward servants carrying baskets of fruit, not toward the noble officials climbing the palace steps. Every breath is controlled, every muscle appears frozen beneath layers of polished armor. To a traveler arriving from distant lands, these guards become the very first message the king wishes to send: strength, order, absolute control. Long before a ruler speaks a single word, he's silent. Protectors announce his authority. The deeper you walk into the palace, the more life quietly unfolds around you. Gardeners trim fragrant herbs beneath shaded walkways, scribes hurry across courtyards with bundles of freshly written scrolls. Servants carry clay jars filled with cool water drawn from hidden wells. Priests murmur gentle prayers near small shrines tucked between towering columns. The palace is less like a single building, and more like a living city enclosed behind magnificent walls. Thousands of people work here every day, yet almost everyone lowers their voice when passing the royal guards. Children instinctively stop laughing, even experienced officials straighten their posture. No one wishes to appear careless beneath those unwavering eyes. Curiously, the guards themselves say almost nothing. Hours may pass without a single spoken word. Their silence becomes part of the palace itself, as familiar as the fluttering banners overhead or the scent of cedar drifting from carved wooden doors. Visitors often wonder whether standing still could truly be difficult. After all, how hard can simply standing be? But that question usually comes from someone who has never tried remaining perfectly motionless for even 10 minutes. Imagine an hour, then another. the weight of bronze pressing against your shoulders, leather straps tightening across your chest, your feet gradually growing numb, an itch appearing exactly where your helmet cannot reach, and still you do not move, because somewhere nearby, unseen behind carved doors and embroidered curtains, the king may be watching, or perhaps someone else is. Inside these palace walls, every movement carries meaning, every gesture is remembered, every mistake may travel farther than the person who made it. As twilight slowly settles over the palace, bronze lamps begin glowing one by one, filling long corridors with soft golden light. The shadows grow longer, the voices become quieter, and somewhere deeper inside this magnificent maze of stone and marble, another guard silently takes his place, for standing still, it turns out, is only the beginning of the story. Morning arrives almost unnoticed. The palace does not awaken with shouting or the ringing of great bells. Instead, it slowly breathes back to life. The first rays of sunlight spill over high limestone walls, painting the courtyards in soft shades of gold. Cool air drifts through long colonnades where marble floors still hold the night's chill. Somewhere in the gardens, a fountain begins its familiar song, while doves flutter from rooftop to rooftop, greeting another quiet day, and already, the guards are standing, perhaps they never truly left, as servants unlock heavy cedar doors and cooks prepare the first meals of the day. The king's silent protectors have already taken their positions. They stand beside gateways, along shaded corridors, near throne rooms, and at the entrances to private chambers. Their presence is so constant that many people hardly notice them anymore. That, strangely enough, is part of their purpose. A perfect royal guard was never meant to draw attention to himself. He existed so completely for another person that he almost disappeared into the palace itself. To visitors arriving from distant kingdoms, this could feel unsettling. Everywhere they turned, another guard seemed to be watching, not with suspicion, but with calm, unwavering awareness. They neither greeted strangers warmly nor frowned in warning. Their expressions remained carefully balanced. Revealing almost nothing, the king's safety depended upon men whose own emotions had become invisible. Many ancient civilizations understood something that still feels familiar today. Power is often measured by what remains quiet. Anyone could hire loud soldiers to march through the streets, raising dust and shouting commands. But only the wealthiest rulers could afford disciplined guardians who needed no words at all. Silence itself became a display of confidence. Imagine entering the royal audience hall. The ceiling stretches high above, supported by towering columns painted with scenes of victories, harvests, and sacred traditions. Incense drifts gently through the air, mixing with the scent of polished cedar and warm stone. Nobles bow deeply before approaching the throne, yet before anyone sees the king, they see the guards. Each stands with practiced precision, feet planted evenly, hands resting naturally upon spear or sword, shoulders square, eyes forward, not rigid enough to appear lifeless, yet never relaxed enough to seem careless. Hours of practice had transformed posture into something almost effortless, or at least effortless from the outside. Inside, muscles quietly trembled. Behind polished helmets, sweat slowly gathered, tiny aches appeared one after another, demanding attention that could never be given. The audience saw dignity, the guards felt endurance. Most conversations inside the palace happened around them rather than with them. Ministers debated taxes, messengers delivered urgent news, royal children laughed while chasing one another across shaded courtyards before being gently reminded to behave. Musicians tuned delicate stringed instruments. Before evening feasts, through it all, the guards remained nearly motionless. They became trusted witnesses to countless moments they could never repeat. Some heard royal secrets, Others watched emotional reunions after long journeys. They stood nearby during celebrations of victory and during quiet hours when grief settled over the palace after the passing of beloved family members. History unfolded only a few steps away. Yet the guards carried those memories silently. Their loyalty was measured not only by courage, but by discretion. A palace could survive many dangers. It could rebuild damaged walls. It could replace stolen treasures. But a single whispered secret escaping beyond its gates could alter kingdoms. That is why the finest guards learned something beyond combat. They learned restraint. Not every threat carried a weapon. Sometimes the greatest danger arrived disguised as curiosity. Visitors occasionally tried friendly conversation. A passing servant might smile. A traveling merchant could ask harmless questions. Does the king receive many guests? Who entered the palace yesterday? Has the royal family traveled recently? The proper answer was usually no answer at all. Silence protected more than stone walls. It protected uncertainty. No outsider could easily measure a kingdom whose guardians revealed nothing. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, shadows beneath the palace arches slowly shortened. Heat shimmered above the courtyards, and distant workers wiped perspiration from their brows. Yet the guards remained exactly where they had begun the day. Patient, watchful, unmoving. Children growing up inside the palace sometimes believed the guards possessed unusual abilities. Some whispered that they never became tired. Others imagined they never slept. One young prince supposedly asked whether the guards simply turned into statues each night before coming back to life at dawn. The older servant smiled at such stories, but the guards themselves never smiled back, not because they lacked kindness, because discipline had become stronger than habit. Eventually, the palace settled into the slower rhythm of late afternoon. Long beams of sunlight reached through carved windows, painting golden patterns across smooth stone floors. Somewhere beyond the royal chambers, another shift quietly approached. Fresh guards prepared to replace those who had stood since sunrise. Yet even that simple exchange happened with remarkable precision. No hurried footsteps, no loud greetings, no obvious relief, only one silent protector replacing another, as though the palace itself had never been left unguarded for even a single heartbeat. And behind such flawless composure lay a difficult question that every new recruit would soon discover: who could possibly become one of these remarkable guardians in the first place? The changing of the guard comes and goes so quietly that many inside the palace barely notice it. One silent figure steps away, another takes his place, and the endless watch continues as though time itself has paused within these ancient walls. If you had wandered into the palace on that peaceful afternoon, you might have wondered about the men standing so confidently beside the king's chambers. Were they born into noble families? Were they celebrated warriors returning from glorious battles? Or had fate simply chosen them by chance? The answer was usually far more complicated. Becoming a royal guard was rarely a matter of luck. Long before a young man ever wore polished bronze armor or held a ceremonial spear, someone had been watching him. Village elders noticed boys who remained calm under pressure. Military instructors observed recruits who obeyed every command without hesitation. Local commanders quietly reported names to palace officials. Patience, reliability, discipline. These qualities often mattered more than remarkable strength. A powerful soldier could win a battle. A dependable soldier could protect a kingdom. In many ancient civilizations, the king placed enormous trust in the men assigned to stand only a few steps away from his throne. These guards would witness private conversations, royal ceremonies, diplomatic meetings, and moments of great uncertainty. They might overhear plans that could change the future of an empire. For that reason, character became as valuable as skill. Some kingdoms preferred experienced veterans, others selected young recruits whose habits could still be carefully shaped. Certain empires favored men from respected military families, believing loyalty passed naturally from father to son. Elsewhere, rulers deliberately chose guards from distant regions, hoping they would remain loyal only to the crown rather than local politics or powerful noble families. There was no single path. But every path demanded sacrifice. Imagine being 16 or 17 years old. Your family gathers outside a modest stone home as royal officials arrive with horses carrying the king's seal. No celebration follows. Instead, there is quiet pride and quiet worry, because everyone understands what this opportunity truly means. You may never again live the ordinary life you once imagined. Your childhood slowly disappears behind you. Ahead lies a future filled with strict discipline, endless responsibility, and expectations few people can fully understand. For many families, the honor was beyond measure. To say that your son protected the king brought respect throughout the region. Neighbors spoke your family name with admiration. Merchants offered warm greetings. Children stared with wide eyes whenever the guard returned home during rare visits. Yet behind that admiration lived another emotion. Distance. Royal service often carried a hidden loneliness. The palace became your home. Your fellow guards became your closest companions. Festivals passed without you. Harvest seasons came and went. Brothers married. Children were born. Parents grew older. Life continued outside the palace walls while yours followed an entirely different rhythm. Not everyone who dreamed of becoming a royal guard succeeded. The selection itself could be surprisingly demanding. Officials watched how recruits handled disappointment. They observed whether pride caused careless mistakes. Some deliberately gave confusing instruction simply to see who remained calm instead of becoming frustrated. Others tested honesty in subtle ways. A purse of coins left unattended, a valuable dagger forgotten upon a table, a whispered rumor shared only with one recruit. These were not accidents, they were quiet examinations. Trust could not be measured with a sword. It revealed itself through ordinary moments. Appearance also mattered, though perhaps not for the reasons many imagine. The king's guards represented the dignity of the entire palace. Clean armor, neatly maintained equipment, steady posture, respectful manners, everything reflected upon the ruler himself. Visitors judged the kingdom long before speaking to its king. They judged the guards. Some recruits possessed impressive physical strength but lacked patience. Others were intelligent but struggled with obedience. A few simply could not endure long periods of silence. Each weakness became visible over time. The palace had no need for perfection, but it demanded consistency. Perhaps that was the rarest quality of all, to behave honorably not only during moments of glory, but during quiet afternoons when nobody seemed to be watching. Ironically, those unnoticed moments often mattered most, because someone was always watching, an instructor. Hidden beneath a shaded balcony, an experienced captain observing from across the courtyard. Even senior guards silently evaluated the newcomers standing beside them. Nothing escaped experienced eyes. As evening slowly settled over the palace once more, fresh lanterns illuminated the corridors with gentle amber light. Newly selected recruits stood together in silence, their polished armor still unfamiliar upon weary shoulders. They had passed the first tests, but earning a place inside the palace was only the beginning. Soon they would discover that selection was far easier than preparation, for the lessons waiting ahead would not simply teach them how to defend a king, they would reshape every habit, every instinct, and every part of the person they had once been. And that transformation began long before adulthood, in a childhood unlike almost any other. The palace slept peacefully beneath the fading stars. Only the guards remained awake. their silhouette stood quietly beneath flickering torchlight, unchanged as the night slowly surrendered to dawn. Somewhere in the distance, a bronze bell echoed softly across the courtyards, welcoming another day inside the royal palace. For the seasoned guards, it was simply another morning. For the newest recruits, it marked the beginning of a life unlike anything they had ever known. Many people imagined that the king's protectors were forged only after joining the palace. They pictured grown men learning to march, fight, and stand watch within these grand halls. The truth was often far more demanding. In many ancient kingdoms, the journey toward becoming a royal guard began years before anyone ever touched palace stone. Sometimes it began in childhood. A boy scarcely tall enough to lift a wooden practice spear would already be learning lessons that had little to do with combat. Rise before sunrise, keep your clothing clean, speak only when spoken to, finish every task, no matter how small, stand with your shoulders straight, respect your teachers. Control your temper. At first, these seemed like ordinary rules, but together they quietly shaped something extraordinary. Discipline. Long before strength filled their arms, discipline settled into their minds. The instructors understood a simple truth. Muscles could grow in a few years, character required far longer. Imagine a quiet training yard outside the capital city. Morning mist lingers above packed earth while rows of young boys practice beneath the watchful eyes of aging veterans. Their wooden shields are scarred from countless strikes. Their tunics are damp with dew before the sun has fully risen. Nobody shouts with anger. The instructors rarely need to. Their calm voices carry enough authority that every student listens carefully. Again, lift the shield. Again, stand taller. Again, hold your balance. The repetition feels endless, and that is precisely the point. Ancient military teachers believed habits should become so deeply rooted that the body obeyed before the mind even had time to think. One day, hesitation could cost a king his life. There was little room for hesitation. Physical training certainly mattered. The boys ran long distances beneath the rising sun until breathing became difficult. They climbed rocky hills carrying sacks filled with sand. They balanced across narrow wooden beams to improve coordination. They practiced wrestling, learning how to stay calm even while exhausted. But surprisingly, the hardest lessons often demanded stillness rather than movement. An instructor might place a student beneath the shade of a tree. Stand, nothing more. Minutes passed, an insect landed upon his cheek. Ignore it. A breeze carried dust across tired eyes. Ignore it. Feet slowly began to ache. Ignore them. The exercise seemed almost meaningless, until hours later, when the exhausted child realized he had been training for palace duty without even knowing it. Stillness was not natural, it had to be learned. Meals during training remained simple: fresh bread, olives, cheese, lentils, sometimes fish, occasionally fruit when the season allowed. No luxurious feasts awaited future guards. The instructors believed a disciplined body should never become dependent upon comfort. Simple food created resilient people. Life inside the training grounds followed an almost predictable rhythm: wake, exercise, study, practice, clean equipment, repeat. Days blended into weeks. Weeks became seasons. Some boys quietly discovered they possessed remarkable patience. Others struggled. Homesickness visited nearly everyone. Letters from family were rare. Visits even rarer. Many lay awake beneath simple blankets at night, listening to distant crickets while wondering whether younger brothers had grown taller, or whether their mothers still prepared evening meals in exactly the same way. Yet with each passing year, the training slowly transformed them, not into emotionless statues, into dependable men. Older instructors sometimes shared gentle stories rather than commands. They spoke of guards whose calm decisions had prevented panic, of protectors who quietly escorted frightened children during palace emergencies, of veterans who remained loyal through decades of peaceful service, never once drawing their swords. These stories taught an important lesson. A royal guard was not trained merely to fight, he was trained to remain steady when everyone else became afraid. As the years passed, the wooden practice weapons disappeared, bronze replaced wood, leather became polished armor, the responsibilities grew heavier, so did the expectations. By now, every movement had become deliberate, every habit carefully refined, every careless impulse slowly left behind. The boys who had once stumbled through dusty training fields were becoming the silent protectors visitors admired inside the palace. Yet one challenge still remained unconquered. It was a skill that sounded deceptively simple, almost laughably easy. Stand, do not move. Remain exactly as you are, for an hour, then another, and another. Only then would they begin to understand why so many experienced guards quietly said that mastering complete stillness was harder than mastering the sword, and that lesson waited with the next sunrise. The first light of dawn slips quietly across the training grounds. A cool breeze brushes through the cypress trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh grass. Birds greet the morning from the rooftops, while somewhere beyond the stone walls, the distant sounds of a waking village drift softly through the air. The young recruits expect another day of marching, another day of sword drills, another lesson in shields or spears. Instead, their instructor simply points toward an empty courtyard. Stand, nothing more. The order sounds almost disappointingly simple. Several recruits exchange confused glances before taking their places beneath the pale morning sky. Their boots settle against the smooth stone. Their hands rest naturally at their sides. They wait for the next instruction. It never comes. The silence stretches on. At first, remaining still feels almost effortless. The body is fresh. The morning air is cool. Even standing quietly seems like a welcome rest after weeks of demanding physical training. Then, almost without warning, the body begins to speak. A slight itch appears near one eyebrow. A shoulder asks to be rolled. One knee quietly stiffens. None of these discomforts are painful. They are merely persistent, tiny reminders that the human body was never designed to remain motionless for very long. The instructor watches carefully. He says nothing. That, too, is part of the lesson. The battle is no longer against another person. It is against instinct. One recruit blinks rapidly, trying to ignore sweat slowly gathering beneath his hairline. Another shifts his weight almost without realizing it. A third scratches his cheek before remembering where he is. The correction comes immediately. Not with shouting, not with humiliation, simply, begin again. And so they do, again, and again. Days slowly become weeks. The exercises grow longer. 10 minutes becomes 20, 20 becomes 40. Eventually, the recruits stop measuring time altogether. Instead, they begin measuring thoughts. The instructors teach them unusual ways to quiet the restless mind. Count each breath. Notice the wind without following it. Listen to distant birds. Feel the weight of your feet upon the stone. Allow discomfort to arrive, then allow it to leave, without chasing it, without resisting it. Although they would never have called it meditation, many ancient training methods quietly resembled practices that people still use today to cultivate patience and focus. The greatest challenge was rarely physical, it was mental, because once the body accepted stillness, the imagination awakened. A recruit suddenly remembered his childhood home, the smell of bread baking in his mother's oven, his younger brother laughing beside a river, the warmth of summer evenings long before palace life. Memories wandered freely through a motionless body. Some brought comfort, others stirred homesickness. The instructors understood this perfectly. That was why. They occasionally changed the surroundings. One day, the recruits stood beneath the bright afternoon sun. Another day, they remained motionless during a cool autumn rain. Sometimes they practiced while palace musicians rehearsed nearby, filling the air with beautiful melodies. Other times, servants crossed the courtyard carrying baskets of fresh fruit whose sweet fragrance drifted past hungry students. Every distraction had the same purpose. Could attention remain steady? Could discipline survive comfort as easily as hardship? The older guards occasionally joined these lessons. Watching them felt almost unbelievable. They stood with such natural calm that they seemed untouched by time itself. A butterfly landed gently upon one veteran's shoulder. He did not react. A curious palace cat brushed against another guard's leg before wandering away. No movement, no glance downward, only quiet patience. The younger recruits began to understand something important. Stillness was not the absence of movement. It was the mastery of choice. You moved only when duty required it, never because discomfort demanded it. As the months passed, the instructors added another challenge: armor. At first, only a leather vest, then bronze shoulder pieces. Soon, a heavy helmet rested upon tired necks. Finally, the complete equipment settled across every recruit's body. What had once been mildly uncomfortable now became exhausting. Bronze trapped heat beneath the midday sun, leather straps pressed firmly against aching shoulders. The weight slowly crept into every muscle. Hours seemed endless, yet the veterans reminded them gently. The armor is not growing heavier, you are simply noticing it more. That single sentence lingered in many minds long after the lesson ended, because it described far more than armor. Fear felt heavier when noticed constantly, pain grew larger when stared at, patience became easier when accepted quietly. Little by little, the recruits changed, not dramatically, almost invisibly. Their breathing slowed, their posture steadied. Their thoughts wandered less often. Visitors to the training grounds began mistaking them for experienced guards. The instructors smiled quietly. The transformation had begun, but standing still inside a peaceful courtyard was only practice. Soon, these young men would wear armor that weighed far more than anything they had trained in. They would stand beneath blazing summer heat, cold winter rain, and endless hours of royal duty. Only then would they discover that stillness was never truly the hardest burden. Sometimes, the weight itself became the real test. The morning sun has barely climbed above the palace walls when the weight begins to make itself known. Not suddenly, not all at once. It arrives quietly, almost politely, settling across the shoulders like an invisible companion that refuses to leave. By now, the young guards have mastered the art of standing still in the training yard. Their breathing is calm, their posture steady, their thoughts less easily distracted than before. But today, another lesson begins. Today, they will discover that discipline feels very different beneath the burden of real armor. An experienced armorer waits inside a cool stone chamber lined with wooden racks. Bronze breastplates catch the gentle morning light. Helmets hang neatly beside polished shields. Spears rest silently against the walls, each one carefully maintained, each one balanced with remarkable precision. The room smells of leather, oil, and freshly polished metal. One by one, the recruits step forward. A thick linen tunic comes first, protecting the skin from the rough edges of bronze. Then padded layers are tied securely around the shoulders. Leather straps are tightened across the chest. The breastplate is lowered into place. Bronze shoulder guards follow. A heavy belt circles the waist. Greaves protect the legs. Finally, the helmet. As it settles onto the recruit's head, the outside world grows quieter. Sounds become softer. Breathing becomes warmer. The simple act of turning one's head suddenly requires effort. For a few moments, nobody speaks. Each young guard adjusts to the unfamiliar weight pressing down from every direction. An older captain walks slowly along the line, studying each recruit with patient eyes. "You are not carrying the armor," he says softly. "For a while, the armor is carrying you." The recruits do not fully understand. Not yet. Outside the palace is already beginning another ordinary day. Gardeners trim flowering shrubs beneath shaded walkways. Servants carry baskets filled with figs, bread, and fragrant herbs. Scribes hurry toward the royal archives with bundles of fresh papyrus. Musicians quietly tune their instruments somewhere beyond the audience hall. Life continues peacefully. Meanwhile, the guards begin walking. Every step feels different. The armor shifts with each movement. Leather creaks softly. Bronze plates touch with a gentle metallic whisper. The weight is not unbearable. It is simply constant. There is no escaping it. The instructors never rush the process. Instead, they allow the recruits to experience something unexpected. Time, an hour passes, then another, standing, walking, turning slowly. Standing again, the armor gradually changes from an object into an environment. It surrounds them completely. The shoulders begin to ache first, then the lower back. The neck quietly protests beneath the helmet. Feet grow warm inside sturdy sandals. Sweat gathers beneath the linen despite the cool breeze drifting across the courtyard. The remarkable part is that no single discomfort feels overwhelming. It is their quiet persistence that becomes exhausting. The older guards know this. Well, one veteran smiles gently as a young recruit asks whether the armor ever becomes lighter. "It never does," the old guard replies, "but one day, you stop arguing with it." That answer lingers long after the conversation ends. Because the greatest burden is often not weight itself, it is resisting the weight. As the weeks pass, the palace itself becomes part of their training. Rather than practicing only in open courtyards, the recruits stand beneath towering gateways where sunlight slowly shifts across the stone floor. They guard silent corridors where cool shadows offer brief relief before afternoon warmth returns. They remain beside carved cedar doors during royal meetings that seem to last forever. Sometimes nothing happens, absolutely nothing. Yet that nothingness demands complete attention. A palace guard cannot become careless simply because the day feels ordinary. History has a curious habit of changing without warning. An unexpected messenger may arrive. A foreign ambassador could appear at the gates. A frightened servant might come running through the halls. The guards must always be ready, even while appearing completely relaxed. That quiet readiness becomes another form of endurance. At sunset, the bronze armor glows with warm shades of amber. Long shadows stretch across polished marble floors. The palace grows quieter once again. Visitors depart. Servants finish their final tasks. The evening breeze finally cools the stone beneath weary feet. Only then do some guards receive permission to remove their helmets. The relief is immediate. Cool air touches damp skin. Necks straighten slowly. Shoulders feel strangely light, almost floating, yet the sensation lasts only a little while. Tomorrow, the armor will return, and the day after that, and the day after that. Eventually, the guards no longer think of the armor as something they wear. It becomes part of who they are, a second skin forged from bronze, patience, and duty. But even heavy armor was only one part of their burden. The palace walls concealed another challenge that no craftsman could forge and no armorer could polish. It lived quietly beneath every disciplined expression. Hidden behind every perfectly still face, a kind of pain that no visitor could ever see. Night lingers for a little while longer. The palace rests beneath a sky scattered with fading stars, and cool air slips quietly through the open courtyards. Bronze lamps flicker softly beneath stone archways, casting long shadows across polished floors that have witnessed countless generations of silent footsteps. The guards are already awake, some have stood through the darkest hours of the night, others are only beginning their watch. To an outsider, every guard looks exactly as they did yesterday, straight-backed, calm, unshaken, almost effortless, but appearances inside the palace have always been carefully maintained. Beneath polished bronze and disciplined expressions lies a truth that few visitors ever stop to consider. The body remembers everything, every hour spent standing, every sleepless night, every heavy breastplate resting upon weary shoulders, every cold winter dawn, every blazing summer afternoon. Each leaves behind a small mark, almost invisible on its own. Together, they become the quiet cost of duty. One of the oldest captains often told his recruits something they never fully understood at first: discipline does not remove pain. It teaches you how to carry it. The lesson sounded simple. Living it was another matter entirely. Imagine a guard standing outside the king's private chambers. The corridor is peaceful, only the faint crackle of oil lamps disturbs the silence. Nothing happens for hours, no messenger arrives, no visitor approaches, no danger reveals itself, yet the guard cannot relax. His knees remain locked in careful balance, his shoulders hold the familiar weight of armor. His fingers rest naturally upon the shaft of his spear without gripping too tightly. Every muscle performs tiny corrections that no observer ever notices. Even complete stillness is filled with movement, tiny movements. Invisible movements. The human body is constantly working to remain upright. By midday, the first ache settles quietly into the lower back. An hour later, it spreads toward the shoulders. The neck stiffens beneath the helmet. Feet begin pressing against worn leather sandals. None of it is unbearable. That is almost what makes it more difficult. There is no dramatic injury demanding attention, only countless small discomforts asking politely, "May I have your focus now?" The answer must always remain the same: no. The instructors had prepared them for this. During training, they spoke often about the difference between pain and panic. Pain was expected, panic was dangerous. A calm mind could endure remarkable discomfort. A frightened mind often magnified even the smallest ache. Older guards discovered quiet ways of living with this truth. Without moving their posture, they slowed their breathing until each inhale felt deep and steady. Some silently counted heartbeats. Others listened to distant fountains echoing through the palace gardens. A few focused on the gentle rhythm of torch flames dancing along the walls, not because these sounds removed discomfort, but because they reminded the mind that pain did not need to become the center of every thought. Years passed, bodies changed. The strongest young recruits slowly became seasoned veterans. Scars appeared beneath armor where leather straps rubbed against the skin day after day. Old injuries from training returned whenever cold weather settled across the kingdom. Stiff joints greeted each sunrise before gradually loosening with movement. No physician could erase the passage of time. Even kings themselves could not command youth to remain forever. Yet something remarkable happened. As physical strength slowly declined, inner steadiness quietly grew. The older guards no longer fought every discomfort. They accepted it as calmly as changing seasons. Summer brought heat, winter brought cold, duty brought pain. These things simply belonged together. The palace physicians occasionally walked among the guards, checking swollen ankles, sore backs, aching knees, and bruised shoulders hidden beneath bronze armor. Simple herbal oils eased tired muscles, warm cloth soothed stiff joints, infusions of willow bark, mint, or fragrant herbs offered small moments of relief after long watches. The healers understood an important truth: even the finest guard remained human. Strength required care. Ignoring suffering entirely served no one. But during duty, the guard stood. That balance between endurance and wisdom became one of the greatest lessons of palace life. Not every ache should be ignored forever, only until the proper moment arrived. Perhaps that is why visitors misunderstood the guard so completely. Watching from across the courtyard, they saw only confidence. They admired flawless posture, perfect discipline, immovable patience. What they never witnessed were the quiet evenings after duty ended, a veteran carefully removing his helmet with slow, tired hands. A young guard rubbing aching shoulders beside a small oil lamp. Friends exchanging gentle smiles without speaking, each understanding exactly how the other felt. Words were unnecessary. Shared experience spoke more clearly. As darkness returned once again, another shift quietly gathered beneath the palace arches. Fresh guards adjusted polished breastplates before taking their places. The weary veterans stepped aside, carrying with them another day's collection of invisible aches. Tomorrow would bring more. And the day after, yet none of them believed suffering alone defined their service. The greatest challenge was still ahead, because pain could usually be endured, silence could usually be mastered, but there were certain temptations, simple, ordinary human habits, that every royal guard had to resist every single day, and breaking those unwritten rules could change a life forever. Morning arrives gently once again. A thin veil of mist drifts through the palace gardens, softening the outlines of marble statues and flowering trees. Dew glistens upon carefully trimmed hedges, while the first rays of sunlight slowly warm the broad stone courtyards. The palace feels peaceful, almost ordinary, yet beneath that quiet beauty lies an invisible web of rules so deeply woven into palace life that every royal guard carries them constantly in his mind. Most visitors imagine the hardest part of guarding a king is knowing what to do. In truth, it is often knowing what not to do. The finest guards were remembered not for bold actions, but for remarkable restraint. Every movement had a purpose, every word carried weight, every unnecessary habit had to be quietly abandoned. Some rules were obvious: never abandon your post, never sleep while on watch, never leave your weapon unattended. But many others were far less obvious: never lean against a wall, even after hours of standing. The temptation could become almost irresistible. A cool stone column promised just a little relief for aching shoulders, just for a moment, yet that single moment could suggest weakness to anyone passing by. A royal palace was a place of appearances as much as protection. The king's authority rested partly upon what people saw. A tired guard reflected poorly upon the throne itself. So the walls remained untouched. Another rule seemed almost impossible: never scratch an itch. The instructors had spoken about this countless times during training, but now the lesson became real. An insect landed on your cheek, you ignored it. Sweat rolled slowly beneath your helmet. You ignored it. A loose strand of hair brushed against your forehead. You ignored that too. Visitors often believed the guards possessed extraordinary self-control. In reality, they had simply practiced saying "not now" to their own bodies thousands of times. Conversation carried its own dangers. Guards were discouraged from speaking unless duty required it. This did not mean they lived lonely lives, far from it. During meals or after their shifts, they laughed quietly with trusted companions, shared simple stories, and spoke of family, weather, or memories from distant villages. But once they stepped into position, silence returned. Even harmless conversations could distract attention. Even a brief exchange might cause someone to miss the soft footsteps of an approaching messenger, or the quiet creak of a door opening unexpectedly. Inside the palace, awareness was part of the uniform. Curiosity also required careful discipline. Imagine hearing raised voices behind a carved cedar door. Perhaps ministers were debating an important decision. Perhaps members of the royal family disagreed over some delicate matter. The natural human instinct is to listen, to wonder, to piece together fragments of conversation. A palace guard learned to do the opposite. He listened only for danger. Everything else belonged to the king. Secrets remained behind closed doors. Eyes, too, followed strict rules. The guards never stared at important visitors. They never studied nobles too closely. They certainly never fixed their gaze upon members of the royal family in ways that might appear disrespectful. Instead, they developed an unusual skill. They watched without seeming to watch. Their attention remained wide rather than narrow. Every entrance, every corridor, every movement, all quietly observed without obvious curiosity. It was a discipline so subtle that many guests hardly realized they were being protected at all. There were other forbidden habits that surprised many recruits. Never complain about the weather. The summer heat belonged to everyone. So did winter rain. The guard endured both with quiet dignity. Never boast about your position. Honor lost its meaning the moment it became pride. Never argue with another guard while on duty. Disagreements could wait. The king's safety could not. One elderly captain once gathered the younger guards beneath the shade of an olive tree. He drew a small circle in the dust with the end of his spear. "This," he said softly, "is your duty." Then he pointed to the vast world beyond it. Everything else can wait. The lesson stayed with many of them for years, because the forbidden actions were not random rules. Each one removed something that competed for attention: comfort, vanity, curiosity, impatience. The fewer distractions a guard carried, the clearer his mind became. Visitors often admired the polished armor, the impressive weapons, the perfect posture. Few understood that the greatest strength of a royal guard could not be seen. It was self-control. As evening approached, warm golden light filled the palace once more. The day's final visitors quietly departed through towering bronze gates. Servants lit rows of oil lamps beneath long arcades. The palace prepared for another peaceful night. The guards took their places exactly as they always had, calm, silent, disciplined. Yet beneath every visible rule lay countless others woven into the daily rhythm of palace life, rules that governed not only the guards, but everyone fortunate enough, or unfortunate enough, to live within these magnificent walls. And as darkness settled gently across the kingdom, those hidden customs quietly revealed themselves, waiting beyond the next doorway. The palace becomes quieter as the evening settles. Golden light slowly fades from the highest towers, leaving only soft shadows beneath marble balconies and carved stone arches. The sounds of the day begin to disappear one by one. The footsteps of servants grow fewer. The voices of officials become distant whispers. The gardens become still, yet behind the peaceful appearance of the royal palace exists another world of invisible customs, small traditions and silent rules that outsiders rarely noticed. A visitor might spend an entire day inside the palace and never understand them. They would see magnificent halls, decorated walls, and guards standing with perfect discipline. But they would not see the countless details controlling every movement, because a palace was not simply a home for a king. It was a carefully balanced world. Every person inside it had a place. Every action carried meaning. Every mistake, even a small one, could disturb that balance. One of the first things newcomers learned was that the palace had its own rhythm. Ordinary life outside the walls followed the rising and setting of the sun. Inside the palace, time moved differently. Certain corridors belonged to certain people. Certain doors opened only during specific hours. Certain pathways were reserved for royal family members, officials, messengers, or guards. A person could walk through the wrong doorway without intending harm and still create an uncomfortable situation. This was why palace servants and guards learned the building almost like a living creature. They knew which halls echoed loudly, which stairways were rarely used, which doors closed with a heavy sound, which corners remained dark even during daylight. Knowledge of the palace itself became another form of protection. A skilled guard did not simply protect a room, he understood the entire environment surrounding it. Some rules were created to protect the dignity of the king. For example, approaching the royal presence often required careful preparation. Clothing had to be clean, weapons had to be properly maintained, greetings had to follow tradition. Even the way someone walked toward the throne could reveal respect or carelessness. The palace was a place where small gestures spoke loudly: a lowered head, a patient pause, a respectful distance. These details formed an invisible language understood by everyone who lived there. The guards learned this language from their earliest days. They watched experienced protectors. They studied how veterans moved through crowded halls without disturbing anyone. They noticed how senior officials waited calmly rather than rushing. They learned that patience was not only useful during danger, it was necessary during ordinary moments too. Another hidden rule involved objects inside the palace. Everything had a place: a ceremonial weapon, a royal document, a valuable piece of artwork, a simple lamp beside a doorway. Nothing was considered meaningless. Ancient palaces often contained treasures accumulated across generations. A small mistake, such as moving an important object or leaving a door unsecured, could create confusion. The guards became guardians not only of people, but of order itself. They protected the invisible structure that allowed palace life to continue smoothly. Even food service followed traditions unknown to most outsiders. Before meals reached the royal table, countless preparations happened quietly. Servants checked arrangements, officials confirmed schedules, guards remained aware of every person entering and leaving important areas. The entire process depended on cooperation between many individuals who rarely received recognition. A palace appeared effortless, but behind every peaceful moment existed careful attention. Perhaps the most surprising rule was one that affected emotions. Guards were expected to remain respectful toward everyone, not only nobles, not only wealthy guests, everyone. A frightened servant, a confused traveler, a nervous messenger arriving with important news. The guard represented the king. Cruelty, arrogance, or unnecessary harshness reflected upon the ruler himself. True discipline required kindness as well as strength. The most respected guards understood this. They knew power was easiest to display through intimidation, but restraint showed something greater: control. As the years passed, these unwritten customs became second nature. Young recruits who once struggled to remember every detail eventually moved naturally through palace life. They no longer thought about where to stand, how to speak, when to remain silent. The rules had become part of them, like armor, like the palace itself. And yet, even with all these carefully maintained traditions, one responsibility remained above every other duty. The guards could follow every rule, master every movement, understand every corner of the palace, but none of it mattered if they failed at the one task that defined their entire existence: watching the king, every second, every moment, every breath. The palace grows quiet before sunrise, a faint blue light rests over the rooftops, and the first sounds of morning slowly awaken the ancient halls. Somewhere beyond the outer walls, farmers begin their daily work. Inside the palace, however, the rhythm is different. Here, every moment begins with awareness. A guard standing near the royal chambers does not simply watch a doorway. He watches an entire world surrounding it. The smallest movement, the softest sound, the briefest change in routine, everything matters. To most people, protecting a king means stopping obvious dangers, a weapon, an enemy, a sudden attack. But experienced royal guards understood something far more subtle. danger rarely announced itself. It often arrived quietly, a stranger walking too confidently, a servant behaving differently than usual, a messenger arriving at an unexpected hour, a door opening when it should remain closed. The greatest skill of a palace guard was not reacting quickly, it was noticing early, long before a problem became visible to everyone else. This required a special kind of attention. Not the nervous attention of someone expecting disaster every second. That would be exhausting. Instead, guards developed a calm awareness that allowed them to observe everything while appearing completely relaxed. Their eyes moved carefully, not constantly, not obviously. A quick glance toward a hallway, a momentary awareness of footsteps approaching, a quiet recognition of unfamiliar voices. Years of training transformed these small observations into instinct. The king's private areas were among the most carefully protected places in the entire palace. Outside royal chambers, guards stood beneath decorated archways and beside heavy wooden doors reinforced with metal fittings. The surroundings were beautiful. Painted walls, carved columns, rich fabrics hanging from balconies, but beauty could never distract them. Their duty existed beyond decoration. Inside those rooms lived the person whose decisions affected thousands or even millions of lives. The king's health, the king's safety, the king's ability to rule, all depended upon many people working together, and among the most visible were the silent guards. Their position near the ruler brought unusual responsibility. They witnessed moments that few others ever saw. A king preparing for a public ceremony, a ruler reading reports late into the night, a tired leader sitting alone after difficult decisions. These moments revealed something important. Even the most powerful person in the kingdom was still human. The guard saw the person behind the crown, but they were never allowed to forget the distance between them. Respect created a barrier. A royal guard could be loyal without becoming familiar. He could admire the king without forgetting his role. This balance required careful discipline. Too much distance could become coldness. Too much familiarity could become disrespect. The finest guards understood where that invisible line existed. Sometimes their duty involved protecting the king from physical threats. Other times, it meant protecting the king's peace. A noisy hallway during an important meeting, an unnecessary interruption. A careless servant entering at the wrong moment, the guard quietly prevented problems before they ever reached the ruler. In many ways, the best protection was the protection nobody noticed. A successful day meant nothing happened, no alarm, no disturbance, no reason for anyone to remember the guards at all. This may sound strange. Most people want their achievements recognized, but royal guards measured success differently. If the palace remained peaceful, they had done their job. As seasons passed, guards became experts at reading the palace itself. They recognized ordinary patterns, the usual footsteps of trusted officials, the normal sounds of servants completing their tasks, the familiar voices of people who belonged within the walls. Because knowing what was normal made it easier to notice what was not. A single unfamiliar detail could stand out like a crack in polished marble. Perhaps a person waiting too long near a restricted corridor. Perhaps a servant carrying something unusual. Perhaps a visitor whose behavior did not match his story. The guard's mind collected these small pieces quietly, like a scribe gathering words for a hidden record. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just constant awareness, and this was perhaps the most tiring part of royal protection. Not the armor, not the standing, not even the long hours. It was the responsibility of knowing that one moment of carelessness could affect an entire kingdom. As night returned over the palace, the king's chambers glowed softly beneath rows of oil lamps. The guards remained at their posts, the same positions, the same silence, the same watchful eyes. To anyone passing by, they seemed unchanged, But inside their minds, they continued their endless observation, a footstep, a whisper, a shadow moving differently than before. The palace never truly slept. Because somewhere within those grand walls, someone was always watching, and for the guards who carried this responsibility, staying awake through those endless hours became a challenge of its own, one that required a different kind of strength, the strength to fight not an enemy outside the palace, but the quiet pull of exhaustion within themselves. The palace becomes a different place after midnight. During the day, it is filled with movement, servants crossing courtyards, officials carrying messages, musicians preparing for ceremonies, visitors arriving through the great gates. But when darkness covers the kingdom, another world quietly appears. The lamps burn lower, the corridors become longer, the voices disappear, and the guards remain, standing beneath silent archways. They face one of the oldest enemies of any watchman. Sleep. It arrives slowly, almost gently. At first, there is only a small heaviness behind the eyes, a slight desire to relax the shoulders, a moment when the warmth of the torchlight feels unusually comforting. Then the mind begins creating its own distractions. A guard may remember a conversation from years ago. He may imagine the meal waiting for him after his shift. He may think about his family sleeping peacefully far beyond the palace walls. The body searches for any excuse to rest, but duty does not change simply because the night feels peaceful. The king still sleeps, the palace still needs protection, and the guard must remain awake. Ancient soldiers understood that staying alert during long watches required more than simply forcing the eyes open. It required preparation. The best guards learned how to manage their energy long before they reached their posts. Rest before duty was considered important. A tired guard was not only uncomfortable, he was unreliable. Some palace guards followed carefully arranged schedules where periods of watch were balanced with periods of sleep and recovery. Experienced commanders understood that even the strongest warrior could not maintain perfect attention forever. A guard who had been awake for too many hours could miss something important, a sound, a movement, a change, so discipline included knowing when to rest. During their watches, guards also developed small techniques to keep their minds focused. They paid attention to their surroundings, the sound of water flowing through fountains, the movement of shadows across stone walls, the changing position of stars above the palace rooftops, the quiet footsteps of servants beginning early morning tasks. The world around them became a reminder that they were still awake. Some guards quietly repeated prayers or personal thoughts in their minds. Others counted breaths. Some focused on maintaining their posture perfectly. The goal was never excitement. A royal guard did not need to feel energized like a warrior entering battle. He needed something calmer, steady awareness, the ability to remain present. Night watches were especially challenging because the human body naturally followed the rhythm of darkness. Long before modern clocks existed, people understood the powerful pull of nighttime rest. The body wanted warmth, it wanted stillness, it wanted the comfort of closing the eyes. The guards had to politely refuse. One veteran explained it simply to younger recruits: the night does not make you weak, it only reveals whether you have learned to control yourself. The challenge became even greater during peaceful periods. During war or danger, fear could sharpen attention, but during years of calm, when nothing happened for months or even years, maintaining focus became much harder. A guard might stand in the same place every evening, see the same walls, hear the same sounds, follow the same routine. The mind naturally began searching for something new. That was when discipline mattered most. The experienced guards understood that ordinary nights were not meaningless. A kingdom was protected not only during moments of crisis, but during every quiet hour when nothing appeared wrong. because the moment someone stopped paying attention was often the moment something changed. The palace itself helped create a sense of awareness. The architecture carried sound. In unusual ways, a distant footstep could echo through stone corridors, a closing door could travel across empty halls, a whispered conversation could reach places where it was never expected to be heard. Guards learned these patterns. They knew which sounds belonged, and which sounds did not. This knowledge made the long nights less about waiting, and more about listening. As dawn approached, the first signs of morning slowly returned. The darkness softened. Birds began singing from palace gardens. The eastern sky turned pale. The final hours of the watch were often the strangest. The body was tired. The mind was exhausted. Yet the end was finally near. A new group of guards would soon arrive. Another quiet exchange would take place. Another night would become a memory. The veterans removed their helmets slowly, feeling the cool morning air against their faces. They had survived another watch, another battle against silence and sleep, but the palace demanded more than endurance. Mistakes could not simply be forgotten. A moment of weakness, a careless movement, a guard who failed to remain awake, could bring consequences far greater than personal embarrassment, because inside the royal palace, even the smallest failure carried a weight of its own, and every guard knew that one day, he might be the person who had to answer for it. The palace wakes beneath a quiet morning sky. Golden sunlight reaches across the courtyards, touching the same stone pathways where guards have stood for generations. Servants begin their daily routines. Water flows through carved fountains. The distant sounds of preparation fill the air. To anyone visiting the palace, everything appears peaceful, perfect, even. But behind that calm appearance exists a reality every royal guard understands from the beginning. Perfection is expected, and mistakes have consequences. A royal guard carried a responsibility unlike many other positions in the kingdom. He stood near the ruler, protected important entrances, guarded valuable treasures, and represented the discipline of the entire palace. Because of this, even a small failure could be treated seriously. Not every mistake meant disaster. Not every error resulted in severe punishment. Ancient kingdoms were not all the same, and every palace had different customs. But throughout history, rulers understood one common idea: a guard who ignored his duty could place everyone at risk. The first lessons about punishment often began during training. New recruits learned that correction came quickly. A careless movement, a poorly maintained weapon, a missed instruction, a moment of disrespect, these were not ignored. Instructors believed that small mistakes during training were valuable because they prevented larger mistakes later. A recruit who forgot a simple rule in a practice yard might one day forget something far more important beside the king, so discipline became part of everyday life. Sometimes the punishment was physical training. A recruit might be required to repeat exercises long after others had finished. More marches, more drills, more hours practicing the same movement. The purpose was not only exhaustion, it was memory. The body was being taught to remember what the mind had failed to learn. Other punishments involved responsibility. A careless guard might lose the privilege of carrying important equipment. He might be assigned less respected duties. He might spend extra time cleaning and maintaining armor. Learning that even the smallest tasks mattered. For experienced guards, punishment could feel even heavier. They already understood their responsibilities. They had spent years building trust. To disappoint the king or their fellow guards could carry a deep personal shame. Imagine a veteran standing before his commander after a mistake. No shouting is necessary, no dramatic scene. Sometimes a quiet conversation carried more weight than anger. The commander knew the guard understood. The guard knew the disappointment was deserved. Honor itself became the greatest punishment. because for many royal guards, their reputation mattered as much as their position. However, the palace also understood that not every mistake came from carelessness. Sometimes circumstances were beyond a person's control. A guard could become ill, a piece of equipment could unexpectedly fail, a misunderstanding could occur. Wise commanders considered these things carefully. Discipline without fairness could destroy loyalty instead of strengthening it. The greatest leaders understood that fear alone did not create excellent guards. Respect did. A guard who served only because he feared punishment might obey commands, but a guard who believed in his duty would remain dependable even when nobody was watching. This difference mattered greatly. The palace needed men who could think, not just follow. It needed individuals who understood the purpose behind the rules. Still, certain failures were considered extremely serious. Falling asleep during an important watch, leaving a position without permission, revealing confidential information, allowing unauthorized people to enter restricted areas. These actions threatened the foundation of royal security. The consequences could be severe because the danger extended beyond one person. A single careless moment could damage the trust built over years. This is why veteran guards often warned younger recruits about something surprising. The most dangerous mistakes were not always dramatic, they were usually small: a little laziness, a little distraction, a little overconfidence. Tiny cracks could eventually weaken the strongest walls. The palace itself was a reminder of this lesson. Its massive stone structures were built carefully, one piece at a time. Remove one important stone, and the entire balance could change. The same was true of the royal guard. Every person mattered, every action mattered, every moment mattered. As evening arrived, the guards returned to their silent positions beneath glowing lamps. The day's lessons faded into the shadows. Some recruits stood with renewed determination after receiving correction. Some veterans quietly reflected upon mistakes from years before. Nobody enjoyed punishment, but many understood why it existed, because the purpose was not simply to create obedience, it was to protect trust, and trust was the invisible wall surrounding the king. Yet the palace was not only a place of rules and discipline. There were moments when the guard stepped away from silent corridors and became part of something far grander, moments filled with music, ceremony, and the shining symbols of royal power. Moments when the entire kingdom watched, and the guard stood proudly beside the crown. The palace changes its appearance on certain mornings. The same courtyards that once held quiet footsteps and ordinary routines become filled with careful preparation. Marble floors are cleaned until they reflect the soft morning light. Colorful fabrics are arranged along balconies. Musicians prepare their instruments beneath shaded columns. Something important is approaching, a ceremony, a royal celebration, a moment when the entire kingdom turns its attention toward the palace. For the guards, these occasions bring a different kind of responsibility. Their usual duty is quiet, invisible. A successful watch is often one where nobody notices them, but during royal ceremonies, everyone notices. They become part of the image of power itself. Long before the king appears, the palace begins its transformation. Servants carry decorations through enormous halls, officials review carefully planned arrangements, messengers move between different sections of the palace, confirming that everything is ready. The air feels different, not because of danger, but because of anticipation. The guards prepare differently as well. Their armor receives special attention. Bronze surfaces are polished until they shine softly beneath the sunlight. Leather straps are carefully repaired. Weapons are cleaned and arranged perfectly. Every detail matters. A royal guard standing beside the king represents more than himself. He represents the discipline and strength of the entire kingdom. When foreign visitors arrive, They often judge a ruler by what surrounds him: the architecture, the ceremony, the appearance of his servants, and especially the guards, a line of silent protectors standing perfectly still beside a golden throne, could communicate authority without a single spoken word. The procession itself is a carefully designed experience. The king does not simply walk from one place to another. Every movement carries meaning. The route is chosen, the order of participants is arranged, the distance between important figures is carefully maintained, music fills the air as the royal procession begins, drums echo softly across stone courtyards, flutes and string instruments create a steady rhythm, banners move gently in the breeze above the crowd, citizens gather outside palace walls hoping for a glimpse of the ruler. For many, seeing the king was a rare and unforgettable experience. The guards walk with measured steps beside the royal group. This is very different from their usual duty. Normally, they disappear into the background. Now, they are deliberately visible. Their posture must be perfect. Their movements must match the pace of the ceremony. Their expressions must remain controlled, even during moments of celebration. Discipline remains. Imagine standing beneath the warm sun while thousands of eyes watch. The crowd cheers, musicians play, nobles display their finest clothing, yet the guard cannot become distracted by the excitement around him. A child waving from the crowd, a musician passing nearby, a friend or relative among the spectators, all must remain secondary. The ceremony belongs to the king, the guard belongs to the duty. Some royal ceremonies carry deep religious or cultural importance: a coronation, a royal wedding, a celebration of victory, the beginning of a new reign. During these moments, guards witnessed history unfolding directly before them. They stood close enough to hear important declarations, close enough to see ancient traditions continue through generations, yet they remained silent observers. They protected memories they could never fully claim as their own. Perhaps this was one of the strangest parts of royal service. A guard could stand only a few steps away from the most important events of his age, and still remain almost invisible. Years later, people might remember the king's speech, the beautiful decorations, the magnificent clothing, the music, the celebrations. Few would remember the quiet men standing nearby, but the guards understood. Their purpose was never to be remembered. Their purpose was to ensure that everything else could happen safely. As evening arrived, the ceremony slowly came to an end. The crowds faded. The musicians packed away their instruments. The banners became still. The palace returned to its familiar quiet. The guards removed the ceremonial expressions they had worn throughout the day. The armor remained, the duty remained, but the spectacle disappeared. Tomorrow, they would return to ordinary corridors and silent watches, yet they carried with them the memory of another moment when they stood beside history itself, because royal service was not only about protecting a king in moments of danger. Sometimes, it was about standing beside the crown when the entire world was watching. And beyond those grand halls filled with ceremony and celebration existed another reality that few outsiders ever understood: the quiet, ordinary life of the people who lived inside the palace walls. The palace appears magnificent from the outside. Towering walls rise above the surrounding landscape. Golden decorations catch the sunlight. Massive gates open only for those who have permission to enter. To people watching from beyond those walls, the palace seems like a place of endless luxury, a world of beautiful rooms, rich fabrics, and endless comfort. But those who lived inside understood something different. The palace was not simply a place of privilege, it was a place of routine, a small kingdom within a kingdom. Every morning, before most people outside the walls had begun their work, the palace was already awake. Servants moved quietly through corridors carrying water, food, clothing, and supplies. Scribes prepared documents, craftsmen repaired furniture and decorations, gardeners cared for carefully designed landscapes, kitchen workers prepared meals for hundreds of people. The palace was alive with activity, yet somehow it remained controlled. Every person had a responsibility, every task connected to another. A single forgotten duty could interrupt the rhythm of the entire household. For royal guards, this environment became their entire world. Many spent years, sometimes decades, inside the palace. The same courtyards became familiar, the same corridors became paths they could walk with their eyes closed, the same fountains became companions during long hours of quiet watch. At first, new guards often felt overwhelmed. The palace seemed endless, every hallway looked similar, every doorway seemed important, every person appeared to know something the newcomer did not. But slowly, the palace revealed its patterns. The guard learned when the kitchens became busiest, when officials usually arrived, when the gardens became quiet, when certain halls were filled with visitors. The building itself became something like a map stored inside the mind. This knowledge was valuable. A guard who understood the palace understood the people within it. Life inside the walls was not only about duty, there were also moments of ordinary humanity. Guards ate together in simple dining areas away from the grand halls. They shared stories from their childhoods. They discussed families they rarely saw. They remembered villages, mountains, rivers, and landscapes far from the royal court. Although they served a king, they remained ordinary people with ordinary memories. Some guards formed friendships that lasted their entire lives. A companion standing beside you through countless watches became more than a co-worker. He became someone who understood your silence, someone who knew the weight of the armor, someone who recognized when a difficult day required no conversation. The palace also contained its own small communities. There were families of craftsmen who repaired weapons, generations of servants who maintained royal traditions, teachers who educated royal children, artists who decorated walls and created beautiful objects. Everyone contributed to maintaining the world behind the palace gates. The guards observed all of this. They watched children grow from curious youngsters into confident adults. They saw servants become respected specialists. They witnessed celebrations and moments of sadness. Their position gave them a unique view of palace life. They were close to everything, yet separate from everything. This separation was part of their role. A guard could know the daily rhythm of the palace without becoming part of its politics. He could witness important events without influencing them. He was present, but always slightly apart. That distance sometimes created loneliness. A person could live among thousands of others and still feel isolated. The palace was full of voices, yet a guard's own voice was often limited. His thoughts remained private. His emotions remained controlled. His personal life waited beyond the walls. For some guards, years passed before they realized how much time had disappeared. A young recruit entered the palace full of energy. Then suddenly, he found himself older, more experienced, carrying memories from decades of service. The palace had become both his workplace and his home. It had taken pieces of his life while giving him purpose in return. Perhaps that was the greatest mystery of palace service. It offered honor, but it demanded sacrifice, comfort, but also confinement, protection, but also distance. As evening arrived, the palace slowly prepared for another night. Lamps were lit along the corridors. The kitchens became quiet. The gardens rested beneath the moonlight. The guards returned to their familiar positions. They knew every stone beneath their feet, every shadow along the walls, every sound carried through the halls. The palace was no longer just a building. It was a place filled with memories, a place where years of human lives unfolded quietly behind enormous gates. But even the strongest walls could not guarantee safety forever. Beyond the beauty, beyond the ceremonies, beyond the peaceful routines, danger could still find its way into the palace, and when the kingdom slept beneath the darkness of night, the guards faced some of their most uncertain hours. The palace is different after sunset. During the day, its beauty is impossible to ignore. Sunlight pours across marble courtyards, visitors fill the halls, servants move between rooms carrying out their endless responsibilities. The kingdom feels alive. But when darkness settles over the palace walls, another side of royal life quietly appears. The lamps burn brighter against the shadows, the corridors become longer, every sound seems clearer. A distant footstep, a closing door. The movement of fabric in an empty hallway. At night, the guards do not simply protect a building, they protect the person whose decisions shape the future of an entire kingdom, and this responsibility feels heavier beneath the darkness. Night has always carried uncertainty. Human beings naturally become more cautious when they cannot see clearly. Ancient rulers understood this. The palace could appear peaceful during the day, yet the quiet hours after midnight required another level of attention. The guards standing near royal chambers were often the final barrier between the king and anything unexpected. Their training prepared them for this. But preparation did not remove the seriousness of the duty. Imagine standing beside a massive wooden door in the deepest hours of the night. The palace around you is silent. The king rests somewhere beyond the chamber. A single oil lamp burns beside the entrance, its flame moving gently with every passing breeze. Your armor feels familiar. Your spear rests steadily in your hand, but your mind remains awake, not with panic, with awareness. A guard knew that most nights would pass peacefully. That was the strange nature of the responsibility. Thousands of ordinary nights might pass without anything happening, yet every single night required the same readiness. The same patience, the same focus. Because the one night when attention disappeared could become the night everyone remembered, experienced guards understood the importance of routine. Before taking a night position, they checked their equipment carefully. The condition of their armor, the strength of their weapon, the placement of their supplies, small details mattered. A loose strap, a damaged shield, a poorly maintained spear, any weakness could become a problem at the wrong moment. The palace itself offered protection through its design: thick walls, limited entrances, carefully controlled pathways, watch points positioned where important areas could be observed. Ancient architects understood that security was not created by one person alone. It came from layers. Walls protected the palace, doors protected the rooms, guards protected the doors, and discipline protected the guards. Still, dangerous nights were not always caused by enemies. Sometimes the greatest challenges came from uncertainty, a sudden illness within the royal family, an urgent message arriving before dawn, a fire beginning somewhere inside the palace, a frightened servant running through the corridors. In these moments, guards had to remain calm. Confusion could spread quickly, fear could cause mistakes. The person standing closest to the king needed a clear mind. That was why emotional control mattered so much. A frightened guard could make a dangerous situation worse. A calm guard could become the center of stability. Many veterans carried memories of nights that never appeared in official records, quiet moments when they acted quickly without recognition. A door secured before anyone noticed the problem, a message delivered safely through empty corridors, a disturbance resolved before the royal family even became aware. These were the victories that nobody celebrated. No songs were written about them, no statues were built. But they represented the true purpose of service, preventing disaster before it arrived. As the hours passed, the night slowly weakened. The darkest part came just before sunrise. The body was tired. The palace remained silent. The final moments of a watch often required the greatest discipline. A guard could almost feel the approaching relief. The first birds began singing, the sky slowly changed color, the next group of guards prepared to arrive. Another night had passed. Another duty completed, but every veteran knew something important. The palace could never completely escape danger. Even the strongest walls eventually faced challenges. Even the most disciplined guards could not control every event. Because history had shown that kingdoms were not only tested during battles, sometimes they were tested during quiet nights, when everyone believed they were safe, and when the darkness outside the palace walls seemed endless. The palace awakens beneath a quiet morning sky. The first sunlight touches the highest towers, slowly revealing the same walls that have witnessed countless generations of kings, servants, and guardians. The courtyards begin to fill with gentle movement once again. Water flows through fountains, footsteps echo across marble floors, the familiar rhythm of palace life returns, and among it all, the royal guards take their places. To those outside the palace walls, their position appears almost impossible to achieve. They stand near the king, they wear fine armor, they represent strength and loyalty. They are trusted with responsibilities that most people could only imagine. For many young recruits, becoming a royal guard was the greatest honor of their lives. It meant recognition, it meant respect, it meant belonging to something larger than themselves. A guard's family could feel proud knowing their son, brother, or father served at the heart of the kingdom. Villagers who once knew him as an ordinary child might now speak of him with admiration. His name carried a different meaning. He was no longer simply a person from a small village, he was one of the king's protectors. But behind that honor existed another reality. Royal service was also a burden, a heavy one, because the closer a person stood to power, the greater the expectations became. A farmer could make a mistake and perhaps only affect his own life. A craftsman could create a flawed object and replace it, but a royal guard carried responsibility that extended far beyond himself. His actions reflected upon the ruler, his discipline reflected upon the palace, his loyalty reflected upon the entire kingdom. Every day, he carried not only armor, but trust. This was something young recruits often discovered slowly. At first, they were fascinated by the appearance of service, the polished helmets, the impressive weapons, the grand halls, the respectful greetings. But after years passed, they understood that the true meaning of the position was hidden beneath the surface. Honor was not found in being noticed. It was found in doing difficult things when nobody was watching, standing through endless hours, following rules when nobody would know if they were broken, remaining calm when others became afraid, keeping secrets that could never be shared. These quiet actions formed the foundation of royal service. Many guards experienced a strange contrast in their lives. They were respected by thousands, yet understood by very few. People admired the uniform. They rarely understood the person wearing it. They saw confidence. They did not see the sacrifices. They saw the position. They did not see the years of preparation. They saw the ceremony. They did not see the ordinary days between those moments. This created a unique kind of loneliness. A guard could walk through crowded streets and receive admiration, yet still feel separate from the world around him. His experiences belonged mostly to those who stood beside him. Other guards understood. They knew the feeling of removing heavy armor after a long watch. They knew the silence after a difficult night. They knew what it meant to miss family celebrations because duty came first. The brotherhood between guards often became one of the greatest rewards of service. Friendships formed through shared hardship. A companion who stood beside you through countless watches became someone closer than family. You trusted him with your safety, your secrets, your fears, your memories. Together, guards created their own small world within the larger palace, yet even this brotherhood came with sacrifice. Time moved differently for them. Years disappeared behind palace walls. Children outside grew older, villages changed, familiar places transformed. A guard returning home after many years might discover that the world he remembered no longer existed exactly as before. This was the hidden price of devotion, giving part of your life to something greater than yourself. Still, many guards looked back without regret, because they believed their service mattered. They protected a ruler. But they also protected traditions, ceremonies, and the stability of a kingdom. Their silent presence allowed countless others to live ordinary lives. Families slept peacefully, markets opened each morning, children played without fear, because somewhere nearby, someone remained watchful. As another evening settled over the palace, the guards stood beneath the fading light. Their armor reflected the colors of sunset. Their faces remained calm. Their duty continued, but time, as it always does, moved quietly forward. The youngest recruits who once struggled beneath their first armor would eventually become the experienced veterans guiding others, and every guard, no matter how respected, would one day face the same question. After years of standing beside kings, after a lifetime of service, what happens when the armor is finally removed for the last time? The palace looks unchanged. The same towering walls remain, the same marble courtyards still catch the morning sunlight, the same corridors continue to echo with footsteps. For a young recruit entering the palace for the first time, everything feels permanent. The stone appears eternal, the traditions seem endless, the duty feels like it will continue forever, but people change, years pass quietly. The young guard who once struggled beneath his first bronze helmet eventually becomes the experienced protector that younger recruits look toward for guidance. His movements become smoother, his judgment becomes wiser, his patience becomes deeper. The palace knows his footsteps. The other guards know his voice. Even the servants who once passed him as strangers now greet him with familiar respect. But time leaves its marks. No person can stand beside kings forever. Eventually, every royal guard faces a question that once seemed impossible. What happens when the duty ends? For some guards, retirement came after many years of honorable service. Their bodies had given everything they could. The shoulders that carried armor for decades became slower, old. Injuries from training and long watches became more noticeable. The same discipline that carried them through youth could not stop the natural passage of time. Ancient societies understood this reality. Even the strongest warrior eventually needed rest. Leaving the palace was not always a sad moment. For some, it was a celebration of achievement. A veteran who had served faithfully could return home with great respect. His family welcomed him. His community recognized his years of dedication. Stories followed him, not stories of battles alone, but stories of patience, loyalty, dependability. The qualities that had defined his entire life. Some former guards received land, gifts, or positions that allowed them to continue serving society in different ways. Their experience became valuable. A man who had spent decades close to the center of power understood things few others could. He knew palace traditions. He understood leadership. He had witnessed the decisions of rulers. Younger soldiers often sought his advice. The old guard who once stood silently beside the king now became a teacher for the next generation. But leaving palace life could also be difficult. After years of strict routine, ordinary life sometimes felt strangely unfamiliar. Inside the palace, every day had a purpose, every hour had structure, every movement had meaning. Outside the walls, there was suddenly freedom, but freedom itself required adjustment. A retired guard might wake before sunrise out of habit. He might automatically straighten his posture when hearing footsteps approach. He might still listen carefully to sounds in the night. The palace had shaped him, and some parts of that life never truly disappeared. Many veterans carried memories that they could never fully explain. They remembered the first day they entered the palace, the first time they wore armor, the first time they stood beside the king, the friends who served beside them, the faces of those who had already passed away. The quiet moments between important events. History often remembers rulers, it remembers victories, it remembers grand monuments, but behind those memories stood countless ordinary people who dedicated their lives to supporting something larger than themselves. The guards were among them. Their names were often forgotten, their individual stories rarely written, yet their presence shaped the atmosphere of every royal court. Some former guards remained connected to the palace even after retirement. They returned for ceremonies. They advised commanders, they trained new recruits. The younger guards listened carefully because experience could not be learned from a scroll, it had to be lived. An old veteran could explain something no manual could teach: how to recognize a person's intentions, how to remain calm during uncertainty, how to carry responsibility without allowing it to destroy peace of mind. These lessons became a different kind of inheritance, not gold, not land, not weapons, knowledge. As the years continued, another generation took their places. New recruits stood beneath the palace arches, new armor was polished, new footsteps echoed across the same stone floors, and somewhere beyond those walls, an older guard watched quietly, knowing the cycle would continue. The palace did not belong to one person, not even the king. It belonged to generations of people who maintained it, protected it, and carried its traditions forward. The old guards had given their strength to the palace, now they gave their wisdom. Yet even with all their experience, even after decades of preparation and service, there remained challenges that tested every royal protector, challenges that could not be solved through training alone, challenges that revealed the true limits of discipline, because standing still for hours was difficult, but facing the unexpected moments of history was something far greater. The palace stands quietly beneath the passing sky. For centuries, its walls have witnessed countless moments: kings rising to power, families celebrating new beginnings, messengers carrying important news, guards taking their positions beneath towering columns. From the outside, these protectors seem almost impossible to break. Their posture is perfect, their discipline is legendary, their loyalty appears unshakable. But behind the polished armor and silent expressions, every royal guard faced challenges that tested more than physical strength. The hardest struggles were often invisible. They were battles fought inside the mind. The first challenge was time. A guard's duty was measured not in minutes, but in patience. Hours could pass with nothing happening, days could follow the same routine, months could feel almost identical. The palace required consistency even when the world around them changed. For a person naturally seeking movement and excitement, this could become one of the greatest tests. The human mind wants variety, it wants new experiences, it wants moments that feel important. But the royal guard learned to find meaning in repetition. The same doorway protected today was still important tomorrow. The same quiet hallway still required attention. The same peaceful night still demanded dedication. This ability to value ordinary moments separated the reliable guards from the careless ones. Another challenge was physical endurance. The body remembers everything. Years of standing on stone floors affected the feet and legs. Heavy armor placed constant pressure on shoulders and back. Long watches tested the ability to remain comfortable while staying prepared. Even simple movements could become difficult after years of service. Yet the greatest guards learned to work with their bodies rather than fight against them. They understood their limits. They maintained their equipment carefully. They prepared themselves before duty. Strength was not only about pushing harder. It was about lasting longer. Emotional control created another challenge. A guard was surrounded by powerful people, important decisions, and hidden tensions. He might witness arguments between officials. He might see the consequences of difficult choices. He might stand nearby during moments of fear or uncertainty, but his role required stability. He could not allow every emotion around him to become his own. A frightened king, a worried servant, an angry noble. All these emotions could fill the palace. The guard had to remain the calm center within them. This required a rare skill, to care deeply, without losing control. There was also the challenge of separation. Many guards spent years away from the lives they once knew. Family celebrations happened without them. Children grew older while they were serving. Friends outside the palace changed. The world continued moving beyond the walls. Meanwhile, the guard remained inside his duty. Some accepted this sacrifice easily. Others struggled with the quiet distance between service and personal life. The palace offered honor, but honor often required giving something in return. Trust was another challenge. A royal guard lived under constant expectation. People believed he would always be loyal, always alert, always dependable. But loyalty was not proven once. It was proven every day, through small choices, through countless moments when nobody was watching. A guard could build trust over many years, yet one careless decision could damage everything. This pressure followed many guards throughout their lives. Perhaps the most difficult challenge was understanding that their work might never be remembered. The king might receive praise. The palace might become famous. The ceremonies might be recorded for future generations. But the individual guard standing silently nearby often disappeared into history. They were essential, yet almost invisible. This required humility, to do important work without expecting recognition. To protect something greater than yourself, to accept that your contribution might only be understood by those who shared the same path. As evening covered the palace once again, the guards returned to their positions. The same stone floors, the same walls, the same quiet responsibility. But now, after understanding their challenges, their silence seemed different. It was not emptiness, it was experience. Every mark on their armor represented time. Every careful movement represented training. Every calm expression represented thousands of moments of self-control. The greatest guards were not those who never struggled. They were those who struggled and continued anyway. Because royal service was never about being without weakness, it was about mastering weakness, and the lessons learned within those ancient palace walls would survive long after the kings and kingdoms themselves disappeared. The palace has grown older. The voices that once filled its halls have disappeared. The footsteps of kings, servants, and guards have faded into history. The banners that once moved above the courtyards are now memories. Yet some lessons from those ancient guardians remain, not because the armor survived, not because the weapons were preserved, but because the qualities that shaped those guards belong to something deeper, something human, across centuries. Soldiers in different lands have continued to learn similar principles: discipline, patience, responsibility, the ability to remain calm when everything around them demands panic. These lessons did not begin in modern times. They were practiced long ago beneath the stone arches of ancient palaces. One of the greatest lessons shared across generations is the importance of discipline. Ancient royal guards understood that discipline was not simply following orders. It was controlling yourself when nobody was forcing you. A person who only behaves correctly when watched is not truly disciplined. Real discipline appears during quiet moments, when nobody notices, when nobody praises you, when the task feels repetitive, when the result seems far away. The guard standing alone during a midnight watch understood this. His greatest test was not always a dangerous moment. Sometimes it was the ordinary hours before that moment. Modern soldiers continue to recognize the same truth. Preparation creates confidence. A person does not suddenly become reliable during a crisis. Reliability is built through thousands of small actions repeated over time. The way equipment is maintained, the way instructions are followed, the way responsibilities are completed. Ancient guards learned this through daily palace life. Every carefully polished piece of armor, every correctly performed movement, every silent hour of watch, together, these created readiness. Another lesson is the importance of teamwork. Although history often focuses on individual heroes, no royal guard protected a kingdom alone. A palace depended on many people working together: commanders, guards, servants, messengers, officials. Each person had a role. A single person could not replace the entire system. This understanding remains important among soldiers today. Strength comes from trust between people. A guard standing beside another guard needed confidence that his companion would remain dependable, not only during danger, but during ordinary moments. Trust was built slowly, through shared experiences, through difficult days, through countless moments when people proved they could rely on each other. Ancient guards also understood the value of emotional control. This does not mean they had no fear. Fear is a natural human feeling. Even the most experienced protector could feel uncertainty. The difference was learning how to act despite that feeling. A guard who controlled his emotions could make better decisions. A guard who allowed panic to take over could put others at risk. Modern soldiers continue to train this same ability, not to remove emotions, but to manage them. The old palace guards also left behind another important lesson: humility. They stood close to power but did not become consumed by it. They protected kings without believing they were kings. They carried authority without seeking attention. This balance is difficult. Many people desire recognition. They want their efforts to be noticed. But the guards discovered something different. The most meaningful service is sometimes invisible. A peaceful night, a safe journey, a successful ceremony, a problem prevented before anyone knew it existed. These were victories without celebration. Yet they mattered. Perhaps the most lasting lesson is the understanding that duty is built from small moments. History often remembers grand events, battles, conquests, royal achievements, but behind those events were ordinary people performing ordinary tasks with extraordinary commitment. The ancient guard standing beside the throne, the soldier protecting a distant position, the person quietly carrying responsibility while others sleep. Their stories connect across time. The world has changed. The clothing is different. The technology is different. The kingdoms and empires have disappeared. But the human challenges remain familiar. How do we stay focused? How do we remain dependable? How do we continue when the task is difficult and recognition is uncertain? The answers found in ancient palace halls still echo today, because the strongest protectors were never defined only by weapons or armor. They were defined by character. As the final light fades across the ancient palace ruins, the silent guards of history seem almost present again, standing where they once stood, watching over a world that has long disappeared, but their lessons remain, waiting for anyone willing to listen. The night returns to the ancient palace. The same darkness that covered these halls thousands of years ago slowly settles once again over the empty courtyards. The fountains no longer carry the voices of servants. The marble pathways no longer hear the footsteps of kings. The great doors remain closed. The banners that once moved proudly above the towers now rest quietly, touched only by the gentle wind. The palace has become what all human creations eventually become, a memory. But if you stand quietly among the old stones, Perhaps you can almost imagine the past returning, the soft glow of oil lamps, the distant sound of footsteps approaching, the quiet movement of a guard taking his position. For countless nights, men stood here, not because the palace was comfortable, not because the work was easy, but because someone had to remain awake while others slept, someone had to stand still while time slowly passed, someone had to carry responsibility without knowing whether anyone would remember. The ancient royal guard was more than a person wearing armor. He was a symbol of patience. A reminder that history was not only shaped by kings who gave commands, but also by the silent people who protected, served, and supported them. The guard's life was built from moments that seemed ordinary: a long watch beneath a stone archway, a careful inspection of a doorway, a quiet walk through empty corridors, a conversation with a fellow guard after a difficult night. None of these moments appeared important at the time, yet together, they formed a lifetime of dedication. Perhaps this is why the stories of ancient guards continue to interest us, not because they fought the greatest battles, not because they held the highest positions, but because their struggle was something many people understand: the struggle to remain patient, the struggle to continue when the work feels endless, the struggle to do what is right even when nobody is watching. The palace guard faced an unusual challenge. He protected the most powerful person in the kingdom, yet he often remained unseen. The king's name survived. The palace became famous, the treasures were preserved, but the individuals standing quietly nearby slowly disappeared into the pages of forgotten history. Still, their influence remained. Every generation that followed inherited ideas about discipline, loyalty, and service. The lessons of those ancient protectors traveled beyond the walls they guarded. They reached soldiers, leaders, workers. Anyone who understands that important things are often maintained by people whose names are never recorded. As the final lamps inside the palace would have burned low, the last guard of the night would have prepared to leave his post. Perhaps he removed his helmet slowly. Perhaps he stretched his tired shoulders. Perhaps he looked once more at the silent halls he had protected for so many years. He might have wondered what would remain after he was gone. Would anyone remember him? Would anyone know how many nights he had stood there? Would anyone understand the weight of those quiet hours? The answer, most likely, was no. And yet, he stood there anyway, because duty was never only about being remembered, it was about believing that something mattered. The ancient palace eventually lost its rulers. Its ceremonies ended, its walls weakened, nature slowly reclaimed what humans had built, but the spirit of those silent guards remained hidden within the ruins, a lesson carved deeper than stone, that strength does not always appear as action. Sometimes strength is stillness, sometimes courage is patience, sometimes the greatest service is simply remaining where you are needed, even when the world is asleep. And perhaps, somewhere beneath the dust of forgotten kingdoms, another palace once stood, another guard once held a spear, another person once faced the endless hours of silence, because history is filled with unseen guardians, people who stood between safety and uncertainty. People who carried responsibilities that few understood, and if we listen carefully enough, beyond the silence of the ancient palace walls, we may still hear their footsteps.